All right, well, welcome everybody. Thank you so much for joining our virtual lunch with John Grisham this afternoon. A few quick Zoom housekeeping details before we get started today. You are muted and you will remain muted throughout the duration of this event. For optimal viewing, use the Zoom view functions to select speaker view so that our author is highlighted on your screen. Please ask questions using the chat box function, and we will get to as many of your questions as possible. We're behind the scenes monitoring the chat box, so type in any questions you have. If at any time you drop off the Zoom or experience technical difficulties, simply click the link again to be readmitted. And if you haven't already, please do not forget to purchase A Time for Mercy at bookhampton.com, rjjulia.com, or wesleyanrjjulia.com. You can click on the link in your chat box for quick and easy purchase, or you can visit us in store. We are all open for safe, socially distanced shopping at all locations. Plus, we have signed books. Purchase now to receive a copy while supplies last. So again, welcome to our virtual lunch with John Grisham. Some of you may recall our recent visit with Mr. Grisham for Camino Wins back in May, and we are so excited to have him back with us, this time to talk about the return of Jake Briggs. The hero of A Time to Kill, one of the most popular novels of our time, returns in a courtroom drama that showcases #1 New York Times bestselling author John Grisham at the height of his storytelling powers. Following A Time to Kill and Sycamore Row, John brings us his third and most masterful legal thriller yet in the Jake Briggs series, A Time for Mercy. John Grisham is the author of 35 novels, 1 work of nonfiction, a collection of stories, and 7 novels for young readers. Which brings us to our moderator today. John sits in conversation with Karen Schumann, R.J. Julia Booksellers Children's and Young Adult Event Manager and Authors to Schools Coordinator for all 3 locations, West RJJ, RJJ, and Bookhampton. Karen is a veteran moderator interviewing the likes of Neil Patrick Harris, James Patterson, and Jeff Kinney, to name a few. And she's about to add John Grisham to the ever-growing list of authors with whom she's on a first-name basis. Thank you again to all for joining us. Now, please give a warm virtual welcome to Karen Schumann and John Grisham.
Hi, everybody, and welcome. This is such an honor. I am so excited for this event. And I want to read a quote actually from you, John, that I find so totally amazing, and then we'll get right into the discussion. I seriously doubt I would ever have written the first story I had I not been a lawyer. I never dreamed of being a writer. I wrote only after witnessing a trial. That's totally amazing to me. So welcome, John Grisham. Thank you for sitting in conversation with me.
Thank you, Karen. I'm always happy to be here, either live or virtually. It's a great bookstore.
I have to say, I have sold a lot of your books over the years just by someone coming in and a new book is out and it's like, well, it's John Grisham. It's going to be spectacular. But I have to say, this was the first book that I've read. So, oh my gosh, now I'm going back. I'm going to read every one of your books. This was totally amazing. Why did you wait so many years? So this is the 3rd one with Jake. Why did you wait so long? He's such a popular character.
Well, a couple of reasons. First of all, I had to wait on a story. Nothing happens until there's a story. And it took 24 years from A Time to Kill in '89 to Sycamore Row in 2013 before I had the second story. And then when Sycamore Row came out, we were, I guess, surprised, somewhat amazed at the popularity of Jake and Matthew McConaughey and the movie and the book and me and whatever. It just kind of, the numbers were pretty surprising. And we realized there are a lot of people out there who would like to see more of Jake. And so from that point on, 2013, I said, I'm not going to wait 24 more years. I'm going to try to find a story. And it took a few years. I found one. And a couple of years ago, I knew I had it. And so I started writing the book in January of this year. And it was, it's always fun going back to Ford County. That's where I'm from, small town in Mississippi. And it's the people I know, the culture, society, history, colorful stories that I grew up with and practiced law around. And I just feel very much at home there. You can probably tell that in the writing. It's just natural for me. So I'm not going to wait 24 more years. I'm not going to wait probably about 5 years from now. I have an idea that might work for another Jake book. So I'm always thinking of stories.
Well, as I was reading the book, I just pictured you being Jake. Is your personality like Jake? Do you see a lot of Jake in yourself?
Well, the first book, Time to Kill, is very autobiographical because I started writing that book in 1985 when I was 30 years old. At the time, I was that struggling lawyer in a small town trying to scratch out a living, dreaming of the big courtroom verdict, the big trial, the center of attention. And at the age of 30, I was in the courtroom a lot. I was trying a lot of cases because that was my goal, other than writing books at the time. It was my goal to be a top-notch, competent courtroom lawyer. And I was kind of on my way, I think. And because of that, I stayed in the courtrooms all the time. Small town, churches, characters, the life around the square, the cafes. I had a pretty wife at home having babies. So life was fun, but life was also a struggle. And, Jake when you meet Jake in Time for Mercy, he's still struggling financially. He's probably in more debt than he was in A Time to Kill. And he doesn't get out of it. He's really, really working hard to get ahead. And that was me a long time ago. So a lot of my beliefs, thoughts, theories about the law, reactions to judges, comments under my breath. That's Jake thinking, and it's very autobiographical.
And I learned so much about the law, and especially being picked for a jury. So the times that I've gone to jury duty, I just never thought of the process behind it. So it's totally amazing how you bring the courtroom to life, how you bring picking a jury to life. Do that is your intention to do, or does that just come out?
It's very realistic. Again, back when I was practicing law, which now is a long time ago, you can't wait. If you have a big trial coming, you can't wait to get the list of prospective jurors. It's usually between 50 and 100 people. They're registered voters in your county. If you don't want to serve on a jury, don't register to vote in most areas because they won't pick you. So you get the list, and it's you're excited a few days before the trial, and so you go through the names, and you're always disappointed by how few you recognize, even though you're from your hometown. You think you know everybody, and you want to right then you start thinking about who can I pick for the jury, who might be sympathetic, who might like me or my client. And yes, it's a process, and it's not at all unusual to hire really high-priced jury consultants to research the prospective jurors ahead of time, to poll the area, to the general geographic area. Take a poll. How do people think about certain lawsuits? It's not unusual to have the consultant in the courtroom, incognito, staring at jurors, watching the body language. These experts can read the way people react to a lawyer, react to the judge, react to the client. It's a fascinating process, and it just this is even better. Some lawyers, really high-powered lawyers, will pick a shadow jury. Once the real jury is picked, they will then hustle out and hire 12 people who sort of match up with the jurors, put those people in the courtroom and not tell anybody. It's not illegal. And those 12 jurors in the courtroom, the shadow jury, and I've thought about writing about this. It's so fascinating. They watch the trial, And during lunch, they meet secretly with the lawyer. You know, how did it go? How did the witness do? They meet at night, they meet in the morning, but they pay the shadow jurors a lot of money, and no one knows what they're doing. It's not unusual for both sides in a big civil case to have shadow juries working in the courtroom. It's just fascinating. It really is fun stuff to write about.
And it's so amazing because the book takes different directions, and I'm like, okay, which direction? Why is he going this way? And then all of a sudden you like turn the corner and it's like, this is why
Yeah.
he did it. How do you do that?
Well, it takes a lot of planning. It doesn't just happen. You have the basic story. I start off with the basic story, and this story was a 16-year-old kid shoots and kills a deputy sheriff after a bad night with physical abuse. His mother was beaten. Okay, and then that kid's going to go to trial. Jake's going to take the case. He doesn't want it, but he takes it. He defends the kid. So that's the basic story. It's going to lead up to a big trial. It's going to lead up to a jury verdict or some action by the jury. Wouldn't dare tell you what, because that would ruin the surprise. And that so you have your story, and then you start spinning off. Okay, to sustain the tension in the book for 300 pages. You got to have some other subplots, characters. You know, one subplot is Jake's financial situation, which is terrible. Another subplot is a big civil lawsuit that he thinks he's going to win, make a lot of money. He does some things wrong, and it slaps him in the face, and he gets bounced out of court. The subplot with the family, the poor family of the kid who's in jail. All these plots start revolving, and to keep them straight, I mean, I literally have to write stuff down and put maps on the wall and charts on the wall and names and pieces. But you got all these moving parts going, and that's when the book is really fun. It's fun to write. The pacing is good, and I just hope and pray the pages turn.
Oh my gosh, from the first word, from the first scene that you paint and write about in this book to the last, I honestly could not stop reading it. It was so amazing. So do you ever like read a book back? Now, would you ever pick up this book now and read it back and just relax?
Never. I've never, with one exception, I've never gone back and read one of my books. And there's several reasons for that. First of all, by the time I finish a book, it takes about 6 months, and that's working, 5 days a week. I am really tired of the story. I'm tired of the work. I'm tired of the people. I'm often tired of the characters, and I want to move on. And I've written 45 books in 30 years, so I don't hang around and dwell on what I've done. I don't think about the books I've written. Occasionally, I will pick up a book at random and just flip open a page and read a paragraph. And about half the time, I'll say, ouch, I was in too big of a hurry. I should have slowed down. I can do better than that. And about half the time, I'll say, not bad, pretty good. So I just don't like to go back and do that. The one exception is a few years ago, they convinced me, I don't know how this happened, to do the audio book, to read the book for the audio of Bleachers, which is the thinnest book I've written. And that's why I said I would do it. And it was just pure misery. Sitting in a sound stage, with headphones on, reading this book for 3 days. And it was so awful that my voice, I lost my voice. It takes a professional actor to read these books properly. I have no theatrical skills, never. And so that's the only book I've ever gone back and read, but you couldn't pay me to go back and read any of my books. I love them. I have to love the stories to finish them, but I'm not going to read them.
So now, A Time for Mercy. Did any part of the story change for you? You had it all in your head. Then when you started to do it, did parts of it change? You
cannot plan everything. You cannot outline everything. You have to have your basic plot in place with the major subplots. You have to have that. For me, it's got to be written down somewhere on paper so I can go back to it and change it. But you don't want to plan everything because the surprises are just wonderful. You'll meet a new character you got to have, or you'll get rid of a character, or you can think of a great, once you get into the book and you've got the characters doing what they're doing, you can, a new subplot pops up or a new scene pops up. And it's often just thrilling to have this scene that you weren't expecting. And so that's what makes the writing fun.
So who was a surprise to you in A Time for Mercy?
There's a scene that takes place, and this is not giving away the plot. Jake runs into a bit of mischief later in the story, a physical confrontation that does not go his way. Let's just leave it at that, okay? And Carl Lee Haley, his client in A Time to Kill, played by Samuel Jackson in the movie. Carl's a pretty tough guy, Carl Lee. I mean, he's don't mess with him. He'll prove that in A Time to Kill. He stopped by to see Jake at his home, and he said, "Hey, Jake, I never could pay you for saving my life in trial, and I'll always owe you. I'll do whatever I can to help you. I've got some buddies, and we don't. We're pretty tough guys. If you'll tell me who did this, I'll take care of them. not kill them, but just make sure they don't intimidate Jake again." And it turned into a great scene because it's not expected, and you know that Carl Lee can certainly carry out his promise, and Jake wants him to, but Jake knows that further violence is not going to help anybody. So they have this kind of confrontation, and Jake says, "No, I'm not going to tell you." And Carl Lee says, "Okay, I'll find out anyway." And so that was a scene that I didn't see coming.
Just kind of, do they just come to, because I loved that scene and I loved the emergence of him. It was just like, oh my gosh, this is masterful. I loved that he became a part of this story. So when you're writing, does all of a sudden you just put it on the page, or he just pops in? I'm always fascinated by how a scene comes to an author.
Scenes like that, well, you have to keep in mind, I know these characters so well, and that is a great benefit when you're writing, I guess, the second or third book in not a series, but about the same people. You know them very well, and you know how they think and what they might do. And so it was still, it caught me off guard to think that the scene was totally unnecessary in the book, which is not unusual. I do that all the time. If we want to edit things and cut some stuff out, we always go back through and talk about potential scenes to be cut, scenes that are not always that necessary. There are always some of those, but I liked it so well once it was done. I said, we're not going to cut this.
So now, was there a scene in the book that you had to take out, that
it's funny. It's kind of funny you asked that question, because I started working on a novel. I started on A Time for Mercy January the 1st, which I do every year. And my goal is to finish by July the 1st. And I get a lot of work done January, February, and March. And I did this year. And then COVID hit, and I couldn't go anywhere. I couldn't leave. We had several trips lined up. I had book festivals in Europe. I had book festivals in New Orleans, fun stuff, stuff I really enjoyed doing. Suddenly we couldn't leave the farm. We couldn't leave town. All I could do was write. And the book got thicker and thicker and thicker, and the plot, more subplots and long. And I started worrying about the length of it. And so I was looking for things to cut out. I couldn't really find anything. I talked to my editor, my agent. He goes through it, line by line. And when I turned the book in, it was 175,000 words, my longest book ever. My goal was 100. My goal is 100,000 words. I'm going to start a book this January of 2021 in a few months. My goal is 100,000 words. That's all. I don't like long books. I don't like to write them, don't like to read them. And so my agent went through, the whole book. He did his edits, and we went back and forth, and we eventually cut 1,000 words out of 175. That's all we could cut. So the book came in at 174,000 words. So no, there was not much cut out of it.
Now, was there a character that was tough to write that you didn't like, but you knew you needed that character?
Who's the worst character in the book? Well, the worst guy in the book, I killed him in the first chapter. He didn't last very long.
But so how about like the relatives, his relatives?
I had great sympathy for those people. The dead guy is a deputy sheriff who was a great guy when he was sober and a monster when he was drunk. And he was a really, one of these blackout drinkers who just became a different person once he got drunk, and he was very violent. That's why he got killed. He's easy to dislike when you first meet him. But I had a lot of sympathy for his family. They're country people in rural Mississippi, but they own land and work hard and tend to themselves. And suddenly their son's gone. He's murdered. He's dead. They had to bury him. So I didn't really beat up those folks too bad, even though they turn out to be a little shadier than we realize. I'm trying to. I can't really think of a character that a bad guy that I didn't really want to use. Not right offhand. Keep in mind, I finished writing this book about 3 months ago, and I tend to forget them real fast.
Really? So then what do you do for the rest of the year? So you write a book in 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
Then what do you do for fun?
Well, I finished July the 1st or thereabouts, and then it takes about 6 weeks to do the editing and polishing and clean it up, and goes to press late August for a mid-October publication like right now. 30% of all books are sold at Christmas time, so the publishers want the big books to come out for the Christmas market. I'll take a couple of weeks off and say I'm going to do this and play more golf and go to the beach. And what happens every year by Labor Day, I'm bored and I start writing something else. I'll write a short book in the fall. One of the kids' books, I've written 3 sports books. I mentioned Bleachers a while ago. I've written another football book and a baseball book. 7 or 8 kids' books. I'm every day of my life between 7 and 11 at the house where I write, the little office there. I have nothing else in my life to fill those hours. Right now, maybe I'll find something in the future. I don't know. Mm-hmm. As for the last 30 years, that's been my golden time to go in my office in the morning, shut the door, no phones, no fax, no internet, no music, nothing but just me in the room by myself with strong coffee. And I did it this morning. And I still love that 7 o'clock punch in time with the clock in my office, and I can write. And again, if I didn't do that, I'd be miserable and I have nothing else to do. So I'll keep writing.
So now you mentioned kids' books. Mm-hmm. So the Theodore Boone books, what's different? Can you tell everybody a little bit about them? Because
Sure.
I know a lot of people don't know that you've done these books, and we love them. We love them at the store.
Thank you. About 10 years ago, my daughter is a school teacher in Raleigh, and she had her first class. She was, I guess, 24 years old, and she was very excited about teaching. And my wife and I helped her fix her classroom. We bought the Hardy Boys series. We bought Nancy Drew series. She was really pushing literacy and reading on her kids, 5th graders. And about 2 weeks later, she came home, and she was home, and we had a dinner. She asked me if I could write suspense for kids. And I'd never thought about that. And she said she was having trouble finding good suspense for kids. There are a lot of kids' books, historical fiction and fantasy and all whatever. But she said, I really can't find any good suspense. I said, okay, I'll think about it. And I came up with this character, Theodore Boone, who's a 13-year-old kid. He's an only child. Both of his parents are lawyers. They practice together in a small town, in a small office, and all they do is talk about the law. That's all Theo has ever known. He knows every lawyer in town, every cop in town, every judge in town. For him, instead of going to watch a ball game, he'll go watch a trial. He wants to be a lawyer when he grows up, either a great lawyer or a great judge. He's on first name basis with all the judges in town. So that's Theo. And he stays in trouble because he cannot help himself. He has to give free legal advice to all of his friends and their families, and he stays in trouble. So that's the setup for Theodore Boone.
So how different is it? Is it harder to write for young people than it is for adults?
It's kind of a different set of muscles. It's not harder, but I'm constantly asking myself, would a 13-year-old kid think this or do this? So the books are easier because they're not as long. They're about 50,000 words. There aren't as many subplots. The vocabulary is easier. I got to keep thinking like a kid. When I was 13 years old, I had a great year in school. I had great teachers. I had great friends. I played on the football, basketball, baseball team. It was just a magical time. I was active in the Boy Scouts like Theo, and the first year of being a teenager, but it was also the last year of being a kid, because the next year you go to high school. And I didn't want to do that. I wanted to be 13 forever. It was just a wonderful year. And so Theo is always going to be 13. I'm going to keep him 13 forever.
So now we're going to jump back to A Time for Mercy, because I always ask authors, where does the name of the book come from? And do you start with that name, or did it change over time? Because it's an amazing title for the book.
Well, thank you. I wish I could take credit for it. I really struggle with titles. I think a lot of writers do, because you want a great title, and so many of them have already been used. The great ones, The Grapes of Wrath, In Cold Blood, To Kill a Mockingbird, Gone with the Wind. Think of all the great titles that have already been used. I could still use them. They're not copyrighted, but so I'm always obviously I struggle. Most of my titles are The Firm, The Appeal, not very colorful. So I really struggle. Occasionally I'll have the title when I start. Usually it's toward the end when I keep eliminating possible titles. A Time to Mercy, though, was so easy because I had the title long before I started. I was back in December, pre-COVID, back in the good old days, I was in New York, and I was at Doubleday, and we were doing some publishing stuff. And had several friends with me, or Doubleday people, old friends. And we were, I think we're signing books or something. And we're talking about the idea for Time for Mercy. And they loved the idea, and we're kicking around. And Judy Jacoby, a lady who's been there for a long time, a friend of mine at Doubleday, she just said, well, how about A Time for Mercy? And everybody just froze. We just stopped and looked at her and said, that's it. So I was thrilled because I had a title before I started writing, which is so rare.
So now I'm going to ask one more question before we go into the audience questions. So as a bookseller, I have like 10 seconds to sell someone a book. So if you were in RJ Julia Booksellers and you were selling A Time for Mercy, how would you describe it in 10 seconds? How would you sell it?
Well, I give myself 30 seconds because that's what my wife gives me. I get 30 seconds to pitch an idea. It's actually a very good exercise, because if you can't pitch your idea in 30 seconds, you're probably in trouble. It's probably too complicated. And so again, it's a wonderful exercise that we go through occasionally. I have to kind of make her sit still for a few. I'll say, okay, can I have you for 30 seconds, okay? And she knows what's coming. This has been happening for 40 years, okay? We've been married 40 years. It's been happening for 35 years. And I'll say, okay, here's the idea. Bam, bam, bam. And with this one, it was easy because it's Jake in the courtroom again. He's defending a 16-year-old kid who killed a cop. It's a dead cop in a small town. No lawyer wants the case, and Jake is forced to take it. He embraces the case, and the town turns against him as it leads up to a trial. So that's it.
That's perfect. I like it.
Thank you.
So questions from the audience. What books do you recommend these days besides your own?
Oh boy, I get that question a lot from people, and I'm just all over the place as a reader. I read a lot of books that I really would not recommend because they're more not academic, but they're pretty dry. Books about the criminal justice system, the prison system, problems with those systems, mass incarceration, wrongful convictions, death penalty. I read those books because that's what I write about, and I want to know the subject matter better. And I'm interested. I like the books. I find it compelling. So I do a lot of reading there. I enjoy other nonfiction, commercial nonfiction. Books by Michael Lewis, David Grann, Hampton Sides. I really like a guy named Ben McIntyre, who's a British writer who writes some really kind of narrative nonfiction books about war and espionage and spies and just really good stuff. On the fiction side, my pandemic challenge was to read all 6 novels by Walker Percy, and I'm still struggling through number 4. I've read the first 3. I'll finish them later. I just read James Lee Burke's latest book, A Perfect Cathedral. He's one of my favorites. Scott Turow, Michael Connolly, Dennis Lehane, Tana French, the Irish writer, Ian Rankin, the Scottish crime writer. I like courtroom dramas. I like police procedurals. Then I'll go back and read an old book by Mark Twain because I want to laugh. He's the funniest guy in the world. So I'm all over the place.
That's cool. So do you think this Jake Brigance story might become another great movie with Matthew McConaughey?
Matthew and I did a 1-hour Zoom last week for, I think it was for one of his nonprofits. He has a book coming out, and so we talked about our books, and we've not spoken in a long time because we went separate ways a long time ago, and the moderator asked Matthew the question, would he play Jake in A Time for Mercy? And I was not about to ask the question because it's none of my business now. But Matthew very skillfully said that should be considered, and he left it at that. But the truth is, if Matthew wants to do the movie, it'll get made. If he doesn't, maybe we can find somebody else. I would love to see all my books adapted to film.
Oh, absolutely. So where do you find a story? Do you wait for the idea to strike you, or do you get it from a trial? I know some, yes, you do, but.
Yeah, they come from everywhere. I read a lot of magazines, stories, newspapers, stuff online about lawyers, lawsuits, litigation, trends in litigation, law firms blowing up, courts, appeals, judges. Again, that's the law. That's where I live. And I'm still fascinated by it after all these years because that's what I like to write about. I'm always looking for an issue that might become a legal thriller. Most of my books have issues. A Time for Mercy really is not an issue book, but there are some, issues in there. So I'm just always, I'm on the board of the Innocence Project in New York, have been for a long time, and we have all these innocent people in prison. I still correspond with several of them. I'm trying to get 2 out of prison right now and can't do it. But there are a lot of stories there. They tell a lot of stories. There are a lot of background stories. And so, I read a lot of wrongful conviction cases. And so there's just a lot of, I think reading is where you get ideas, not just fiction, although I get great ideas from other people's fiction, but nonfiction, magazines, stuff online. I'm always looking for example, I mean, there's the opioid crisis. I know that there's a big, thick novel in there somewhere. There's so much suffering and death, and you have big pharma, and you have doctors, and you have the trial bar, and you have all these players who are, and then all the victims. It's really complicated. There's a novel there, but I haven't found it yet, and so I zero in on something and try to find the story.
So let's see, so people want a sequels to The Client, a fall follow-up to Calico Joe. So many readers want to see your stories continue. What are you working on right now? Can you tell us?
I am working on a basketball novel. Yeah. I love sports. I love college sports, and I've written three sports books already. And I've always wanted to do a basketball novel because my wife and I are big college fans. She's a Tar Heel from North Carolina, so that's basketball is very important. And I finally had a story. It's been kind of brewing for a couple of years. It finally came together, and I'm working on that now. I hope to finish it fairly soon and publish it next year during the basketball season. That's kind of the plan. None of that is in concrete. I'm not sure we're going to have a season, and that's pretty sad. But so I'm working on that. January the 1st, I'll start the legal thriller. And, got a couple ideas. Nothing, usually around Thanksgiving of each year, it's time to pull the trigger on the next idea. And luckily, thankfully, mercifully, I've always had the next idea.
That's cool. So this is a fun question. If there were a movie about your life, who would you want to play you?
Oh, I've never thought of that. I mean, that would be a really boring movie.
Oh my gosh, it would be anything but boring.
No, I live a very normal life. We've kept life as simple as we can. I've been married to Renee for 40 years next May. We've been together, have two great kids. We've been lucky. We were lucky. We were blessed with great parents, which is crucial to a successful life. Mine are gone. Renee's parents are still around. We still enjoy them. Been blessed with great friends, and there's been no great drama or tragedy. It's going to happen because it happens to everybody. But there's nothing really dramatic about my life. So I would never agree to a movie. If they made one anyway, I would ask my buddy Matthew to play me. Not going to happen.
So what is the best thing about being John Grisham?
Publication is always fun. I've done it a number of times now, and every year that I do it, we had these rituals. We go to New York, and Renee normally goes with me, and for 3 days in New York, and we go out to eat the night before the big TV show. It's now at CBS this morning with Gayle King and Anthony Mason and Tony DeCopel. They're still doing books. Most big morning TV shows don't do books anymore. So that's unfortunate, but CBS is doing a great job. But the night before, we'll go out and have a publishing dinner with friends in one of our favorite restaurants in New York, and early Tuesday morning, get to the studio, do interviews all day, and that's publishing. The publication moment has always been a lot of fun. So that's when I write the book, I'm always alone, and that's fine. but it can be kind of a lonely profession. And you're proud of it when you're finished. You're also exhausted. You want to get the thing out, and then just when it comes out, when it's published, it's a big moment. Even after all these books, I still enjoy publishing. I didn't tour for a long time, and then 3 years ago with Camino Island, I decided to tour. I went to Madison to R.J. Julia, and everywhere I went, I would invite local writers to come to the bookstore for an event. And we would do a podcast. And the podcast is called Book Tour. And it was me. And so I got to meet so many wonderful writers I had never met before. And that's a whole lot of fun. I met a lot of readers who are buying the books. And there are a lot of, I have very few bad days. I'm blessed, okay? I'm very blessed.
That leads me to the next question. Is there a worst thing about being you?
I guess my golf game. I started playing golf at the age of 10 years ago, the age of 55, which is insanity to take up the sport that late in life, to take up a physical sport that late in life. And so, and I realized immediately I don't want to practice. I don't want to take lessons. I just want to go play. Well, if you don't take lessons or don't practice, you're never going to get any good. And that's where I am 10 years later. So that's the one thing I would like to improve on is my golf game.
So before we go, I have one, unless the audience has a couple more questions, that would be fine. What do you want people to take away from this book, A Time for Mercy? And what would you say to someone who's just being introduced to John Grisham? Because I think that there's a whole generation of younger people who need to read these books because they're so inspirational for anybody who wants to go into law, if anybody's interested in how our legal system works and all the different things. What do you want people to take away from this book?
My goal with every book, the most important thing is to entertain the reader. This is not, literary fiction. This is hopefully a high quality of commercial fiction, popular fiction. That's what I write. So it's entertainment is the most important aspect of what I do. Occasionally I'll put an issue in a book but it's still an entertaining legal thriller so that the reader may see an issue or see both sides of an issue and maybe become aware. I'm not in the business of delivering messages or preaching or, that's not what I think I'm doing. I'll take an issue like the death penalty or wrongful convictions and write a novel around it and try to raise awareness, but I'm not advocating all the time. I don't really want to send a message. I want to entertain.
John Grisham, this has been an honor and a privilege to be able to sit here with you and R.J. Julia Booksellers. We are the luckiest bookstore on the planet because you come to see us all the time and now virtually. And everybody who has attended today, this book is absolutely amazing. You are going to just pick it up and you're going to read it in an afternoon because that's what I did. But John Grisham, thank you so much for coming, taking the time. Everybody here, thank you. Thank you for coming. And please pick up your copy of A Time for Mercy. So
thank you, Karen. Always a pleasure. Bye-bye.
Bye.